Hello, America, Americans, world, Russians. We are in a semi-ancient trap. Therefore, one must rap. So Tucker Carlson was reportedly threatened by the to be arrested if he said the wrong thing to Mr. Putin. Now, this breaching method, clearer than day, which is assigned black pupils and white survivors to be left out with the color treatments or to be sensed by a breaching method. Through our schools, we have other communicator for our founders than they communicated for us to communicate for themselves regarding James Madison's agreement with George Washington and how both of them were tortured, extorted, enslaved, and there was a breaching method against everyone sickly distinctly, measuring and maintaining other pretended or that person's sense through our own. Sustained had been roles with this from semi ancient times, and our roles blaming other things, others, ourselves for what that breaching method caused, and which it is still causing because nature is still demonstrating it, for example. But other things, others, ourselves, are being blamed for that. It's such a simple thing. So, this is the hyperscope black pupils, to have black pupils, white survive, and this color brought up without the breaching method. We have to use, I'm not even a lawyer, we have to use phrases like criminal foreign influences. Nature shows us the existence of the needs to use the phrase hyper criminal foreign influences. It exists, even if it's, in other words, this took remote possession of self defense uses of names like America, countries A through Z, as systems tactile ulterior from humanity's employments of A through Z. Now, employments tactical ulterior hyper additionally as grounds voicings through and as systems natures of identity tactile ulterior. We see the pictures in Palestine. Now they have our voices locked down. This breaching method assigned the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, blamed on other things, others, ourselves, and roles with it, knowing that nature would continue to demonstrate. It's not just that our schools have American history wrong. It's not just how they get away with it. So through time, why don't we use that as evidence? Obviously, it was not about a tea tax. Someone could say, "Oh, I believe it was about a tea tax." Slavery was entrenched sickly distinctly against everyone this way, North and South. See, they have the nature of the debate and they have the nature of people's sense and sensibilities as collusion with all formal locations where where they have they're a certain type of victim slash hyper victim like everyone else, also guilty that way as victim predator slash hyper predator. Otherwise, that body is sensed, even if that body is a majority of people, black peoples, even if it is a majority of countries. And so this we blame the other things, others ourselves. Why words like power, the fake sides of integrity, and what's caused it, and exceptions as collusion. Use tactical terror from how nature uses exception, which is an appreciation of a special difference too. See, this special difference comes with this hyperscope as means to discern. A predicate acts with facts delivery system method had been entrenched since semi-ancient times, since before they were forced, tricked, and persuaded to be modern countries' names, used criminally foreign influenced anyway. But when it was America had no country anywhere, had to make a country out of nowhere, while everyone was only fighting to be a country because they were counter extorted. Everyone was already tortured, extorted, and in fact, human nature enslaved including kings. No one wanted roads. Slavery was used to measure and maintain collusions with black and white, for example, and intercultural and intracultural people who had to hide something. So they forced sustained roles with it through others to make nature demonstrate them too roles with it, but to keep that contained blame. Like, how is white still being blamed when Native Americans are white too? In other words, in other words, all the white people, in other words, and the people who attacked the Native Americans. How would we not have recognized how they are 1/3 of our founders, and then grouped too, and with the founders that had to be counter-extorted by James Madison as the face of our founders. He told us, we were told, we were communicated to get discern properly why president/chief. And nature shows us why chief/president simultaneously. Positive both ways and checking to be, because of the third. Have three distinct identities of hyper and invisible, but still discernible. And it is functional how the hyper invisible but still discernible is such as, again, why, how all the parts of speech are the invisible but still discernible. But why and how there are more than one name for the verb is demonstration of the invisible, hyper invisible, but still discernible. Why and how we could only grapple with subjects individually grouped or together simultaneously. And the value, how the value of a sequence true before this as itself. That which is hypernative. We could sense this. Systems others. We might have this suits and ties, composure, and or anger regarding the most serious things, but that is fake. Emotions and descriptions of them by a person or by someone else. If they're leaving out the integrity, which everyone does, otherwise the sense of how the system is, in other words, they're used to sense. If someone is using a system tactical ulterior or ulterior from the one that is positive unto itself, where it shows us there are 5 distinct identities of positive that are positive simultaneously. Otherwise, it's a criminal insidiousness nature of positive, or it's a truth being used for a lie, or to screen a lie, which there's a lot of that going on. On a mass scale, people pretend politics mean what they don't. People pretend the incompetence of leaders. This is because they came from locations, areas, and states. If you entertain locations, areas, and states, treatments of the difference, for example, just of individual group difference /s, and species volume, all humanity voicing. Again, you guys can't even get the T-tax right. Everyone was given a means to have courage where there was none. There was no hope. Slavery was entrenched, therefore, against everyone, sickly, distinctly, too, to maintain functional. Anyone's going to address that. Everyone's going to have to address that. They're going to try to become anywhere near capable of being a unity or a nature of independence. Put crazy laws against everyone. See Tucker's Carlson's the legal of this country stayed abridged, and in Russian the same thing. This is why they cut Vladimir Putin off when he was communicating with Tucker Carlson recently in an interview. And this is why, because they had this breaching method measured and maintained. What our country was supposed to understand, everyone, about the agreement between James Madison and George Washington before they had been counter-extorted, forced to pretend other motivations for it and things like that, and to get eventually set. He told us, directed to get the Constitution unabridged and understood where and how we have rights that are too numerable to list. See, we have nature debate roles with questions and uses of words like crimes as measured and maintained sequence shifts, cover ups, collusions too. Because little kids, before they are in third grade, they have the means to discern how nature increasingly how individually grouped and together Native Americans were sickly, distinctly hurt, just the same way the colonists had been before this, the same way they had already separated since semi-ancient times. If you look what's actually recorded true, always most probable and practical to convict, to theorize, let alone to convict about history. There were criminally foreign influence database relationships, self-value to that person was sensed, even if that body wasn't a majority of people. This is before modern religions, even before the birth of Jesus Christ, which might have been a title too originally. This is partially they did damage control, and we've been, in other words, we're supposed to stay in the part of the Old Testament that is about the sciences, but people don't even know about that part because they're defending the religious books out of sequence because there are collusions with the people who counter them too. A Dean Judge has roles without someone with the name Wayne. I don't know his last name. These are people with Berlin and Kensington intelligence community involved also on medical and fire campuses and child campuses, further with child offenders, including medical and sexual at the same time, different natures of organized crime. It's also relevant to where and to how this breaching method is assigned other things, others ourselves, blamed for what it caused and keeps. And then it maintained that self value by a certain type of victim slash hyper victim, only capable of not discerning how it was not about routine tax, which led to America. It was not. It was not. Courage, led by freedom, led by honesty, led by integrity. It was under the guise of that, it was screening it, and it still is. Leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. We have our countries, we have the intelligence community knew. Let me tell you about something about, I'm not a police firm or anything. Let me tell you about something about intelligence community. It's known. The suburbs in Russia and America, before our founders were born, they were designed for the torture, extortion, and slavery of our founders. They were designed tactically denatured to force, trick, hurt, and persuade. Roles with the only means, needing resources from other locations, areas. Now tactical ulterior from how nature demonstrated we need things from other areas, locations. This is a breaching method that employed uses of names. Back and forth, he said, she said, to measure and maintain means to screen roles with the foreign bodies using remotely. The adults and the kids of the intelligence of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, hundreds of nations shared, their religions, the spots of the religions tied to them, insidiousness of the logic of people A through Z, people next to all locations increasingly because of this. And whatever they do the opposite too. You have to not look over the predicate acts with facts method that this hyperscope has means to discern for us. I do it. So we have black people's white eyes. We have the same color eyes, different color eyes, same time. Fish, they have the same color. They have eyes almost look exactly like us. So we have this hyperscope, so to speak. Some ways greater than and more finite than a telescope, a microscope. And then some, we have war going on in Ukraine as reported, and we have war going on in Palestine as reported. And still we have suits and ties, counters and exceptions. They have natures of peace and calmness and or aggression. And when you search their premises treatments, it's all names uses and blame, leaving out, in other words, it's in other words, leaving out the breaching method, leaving out the collusions that most people don't know about. But like for example, there are police forms who are also doctors, and they are tactically delusions wrought too. But they have roles with mental diagnosis. And this is relative to where they have real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures at all spots. But this breaching method is from before modern religions messengers were even born. It assigned the names A through Z used as systems tactical terror from its own. So, and it knew that nature would demonstrate that with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. That would also contain demonstrations of the breaching method, a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, if you will. I'm not a lawyer. And countries were conceived this way as archetypal criminal enterprises with locations, areas, and states, voices needing to counter things like criminal foreign influences / hyper-criminal foreign influences. And correctly, this breaching method knew they wouldn't know how to do that properly. So it forced, tricked, and hurt names A through Z as countries to blame other things, others, ourselves for what the breaching method did, the hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, if you will. And then it sustained that. And now they have that self-defended. And they're not even realizing that the breaching method's knowing that. And it's using that remotely. It mastered this before anyone was even born. Before our founders were born in America and in Russia, the suburbs were already designed tactically to nature for the people of the suburbs to be reliant upon resources and natures of people in other locations. Now, as systems and assignments, employments of names, tactical systems again, tactical terror from nature. So we have to understand how the Native Americans and our founders had to counter extort the other third of our founders, and had to become a unity, which never became, except for how they forced it. So I don't know what country you're from. Timestamps. In the Ninth Circuit Court, they had post dated. They had legal papers that had been brought to the Ninth Circuit Court right in Manhattan, right next to the World Trade Center towers. They had post dated them from inside the Ninth Circuit Court before the World Trade Center attack tower to make that look to the panel of judges right before the World Trade Center attack towers in the court right next to the towers as if it had been filed late. That was proven after the World Trade Center. There was an old saying, it was Castro or it was Napoleon said, you don't have to you don't have to change the news, you just have to delay it. See, everyone then gets backed into defending natures of logic, styles of logic that are tactically delusions or criminally foreign influence. Then they want to pretend we're calling them names. And then they want to lie about our motivations for using their names because people jumping in our conversations. Like, for example, WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others and with the intelligence community next to them. And Fox Connecticut News at the same time. WTNH has been planting evidences on off crime scenes, certain type of victim / hyper victim, because their roles with the names next to their locations. And then further, how the F.B.I. is next to the WTNH has something to do with their roles with names along Church Street in Old Weathersfield, associated with the name Cololo that our Weathersfield police have, for example, and their lawyers, associated also with a lawyer of a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act. He has been planting evidences with people next to Central Connecticut State University and next to Trinity College who have been involved with, who and are still increasingly involved with untimely deaths with Weathersfield police and wire crimes with them, and planting evidences on all sides of my house and their houses and my past neighbors too. They're playing these games where everyone speaks through others, where they have the right to force that, and they're putting everyone to fake and change words and totally faked up conversations, fake ties, nature ties to people. Then they say, "Oh, we'll leave it to the courts." A whole bunch of people out of the state judicial branch offices, out of state corrections offices, involved with predicate acts with the same house/s, and police departments that have been attaching little kids with foreign and domestic intelligence and medical tied to them personally and professionally to fake conversations with themselves and with others while they are tactically delusions raw. These are people involved with prisons, state corrections offices, and houses next to it, and businesses next to it. Involved also with Sandy Hook campuses and a corrections, a prison. There's a prison in Sandy Hook, Newtown, Connecticut, is involved with various natures of crimes, also with forensics locations and families named O'Brien and Cologne, people tied to them with the name Lewis and Cleaser, on off Trinity College with a Joshua Stryker, and people putting fake things in the databases with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, unions, families involved with identity theft, frauds, slander, police sports, all different kinds of natures of organized crime roles of child abusers, leaders of kids, leaders of elderly homes, names next to them, leaders of veterans' homes, spots next to them. So since founding, you guys have had other communicated for your founders, even if you're not Americans. The other countries had other communicated for their founders than they were supposed to communicate to. Had everyone been honest too, we would have. Nature shows us there's a hyper foreign that is making everyone blame criminal foreign influences, leaving the foreign influences, the hyper foreign out. And everyone is forced, you can't entertain the suits and ties logic. So, what's good? Timestamps. There's all these crazy things in the world. We can end them like that. Better than the suburbs were designed before cars. We go like that. It takes, you can make more energy and save more energy dropping water than it takes to lift it. This is all kinds of plastics in the ocean and got fuel spills. How many times they can't stop it because there are suits and ties, counters, and exceptions that are a certain type of victim/hyper victim. Even when they're blaming things correctly. See, like everyone's fighting to use the word genocide. But no one cares about how those courts and the people that are defining these words are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw. Obviously, the people who speak for the law. Now, if they could spoke for the law or the sciences, like look at New York City. The suburbs were designed for the torture, extortion, and fact, human nature, slavery of our founders, and of everyone sickly distinctly. And slavery was entrenched north and south. So they would not get away with blaming that on other things, others ourselves, with that cause. And by pretending to believe it's about a tea tax. They do this to measure and maintain, and collusions they send a tax on people based on their differences. They also make they hold everyone as collusion with speaking for differences. How could we speak for differences all this time with black and white, leaving out how we have black people as whites of eyes, leaving out how we could just use that simply alone and we could discern fake integrity of science speaking, haven't spoke, and being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence. See, but they need us to use the words, the criminally foreign influence, that's countries A through Z, leaving out the hyper criminally foreign influence. Yeah, modern countries Yeah, that's how we build. But we have to build an identity. We can't afford through the way they have everything. This is the okay. This is the scale. In other words, they can't even tell they can't afford to have American history told. Then the suburbs were designed tactically to nature. There are proofs that like because there's artichokes and asparagus. Those are like the only perennial vegetables, basically. I mean, there must be more, but there are proofs that they just tactically denatured Earth and forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded, as they were shown remotely means and needs to, while being used remotely by the hyperforeign. Then modern religions came, and they were trying to tell us the names of the sciences and the names of the peoples of the sciences, distinctly, non distinctly, and simultaneously are being used remotely to keep us from seeing, discerning how nature itself uses, how it is hyper simultaneous, distinctly from how it is simultaneous. It is the identity of hyperrelativity. That is why the fish didn't invent how they have two eyes, and humanity didn't invent how we have two eyes. There was a hyper additional nature, a distinct nature of simultaneous. So, so God, nature also shows us, science shows us. God, the ancient pantheism was a science that was an identity of sophistication that needed to appreciate the God variable. Because God, this is about the hyper simultaneous is a hyper additional nature. It's an identity of forever nature that is making more of itself, self, through temporary slash lasting space nature. And English clearer than day was revealed to teach this. But English also was revealed to be taught as a science slash appreciating the science, the identity the sciences share, and how hyper additionally the difference slash s of the other languages individually grouped and together was also shown by how it and with the actual sequence of human relations, for example, and human communications, which is simultaneously greater than and more finite than, and with active relativity and grouped relativity simultaneously in ways that we have syntax that can't afford this. We have functions, natures that can't afford this. So they have laws where they're allowed to speak about economics anyway, and that's fine. But they're not supposed to leave out how the breaching method assigns exceptions in exception nature to be used by systems and as systems tactical terror from its own. So we have means to discern that and how the intelligence agencies were used and are used, measured, and maintained self-value, and how they grouped criminal enterprises wrong. And they can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract, convictions proper, theory, let alone convictions proper, regarding the predicate acts with facts delivery system method that originally assigned groupings. As one, in other words, we can discern this by discerning a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise. This is also what Little Rap Guy and Friends are about. Little Rap Guy and Friends are going to show the proverbial devil, the proverbial Shaytun, the hyper archetypal criminal enterprise from semi ancient times before modern religions came about, and then how they came about to teach about this and how it discerned how they had to leave that in cipher. And so it deciphered it first and took over how people interpret subjects, religions. Same thing they did with our founders. We were supposed to understand how and why George James Madison, as the face of our founders, we're supposed to explain him as the face of our founders. And they made an agreement through James Madison with George Washington, and they were using we're supposed to understand his plan, which was to counter extort at 13 locations within more than 13 colonies, north and south, that were the possession of other countries that weren't in possession of themselves, because they were the hyper possession also grouped. See suits and ties, counters, and exceptions. This is the foundation of that. Same thing. Oh, because there's war and we needed peace at the same time. Of course, this breaching method knew that would be. It employed names A through Z. See, in the breaching method, appreciated the ancients did how we are individuals of a species body, individual body. Grouped difference slash S have to do with this. Narratives and natures regarding diversity, they are being maintained per bullying, for example, but is also per the opposite and the difference of that. Like with Cromwell Schools, has mayors, there's mayor with the name Faenza, involved with body dumping spots. Federal evidence is crimes with people associated with body dumping spots. Inability that he doesn't know about, but they don't know about. And the people associated with this. And these are also people on off Elm Streets in Weathersfield and Rocky Hill and spots next to the news locations and next to WFSB and next to the state judicial branch offices. People involved with conjunctions and adjacents to the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices, they are being and have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. Forgiveness is because of how by as victim predator slash hyper predators. So they've been fabricating audio and video transcripts on off campuses of each age and connecting kids to self-value collusions with that, where and how they direct adults and kids to act and pretend things, but to leave out what's actually recorded and uses of everyone's self-value while pretending others. Before they took oaths, they were criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought by pupils. So we have to appreciate how American history is taught wrong. Also, the difference between how there are different differences between campuses A through Z, vertically and horizontally, not just because they are for different ages. Those differences are used remotely, effectively to measure and maintain, where they have such entertained and defended rightfully and wrongly, and the difference of that is also used to measure and maintain. Used as systems tactile ulterior than the one that is positive to and as the republic for which we stand, still abridged. We're supposed to speak about those original abridgments, how they were, and understand how they stayed entrenched. North and South. We're supposed to understand how the North and South, that our founders were only capable of forcing 13 states to become out of nowhere, even though it was crazy laws against everyone that was involved with it, because they had to counter extort them, and then those crazy laws would have killed them if they didn't rely upon the people counter extorting them, which is James Madison as the face of our founders, and George Washington as the face of our first president. And there's a difference between our founders and our presidents. And there's a difference between the founders in the context where they had to be counter extorted, and between how they were James Madison, and between how they are increasingly the nature and the value and the identity as chief, as Native Americans individually grouped and together. It is the reason that Native Americans individually and together had to fight with each other syntactically, even though they didn't want to. And that was forced increasingly until they were physically fighting with each other. Also because of the tactically denatured suburbs. The ground is no longer less and less, is not capable of holding worms more and more. And note when all the bugs go away when it's raining, what's right there for the birds? The worms come out of the soil. They used to. They used to be in the puddles. Now the earth's tactically denatured. We go to the stores. What happens when the store has no food? What happens with the people who said who has the audacity to let people get away with pretending that they really believe that Science Honest spoke for New York City, a city across anywhere in the world. You cannot defend that logic or what you pretend to believe and afford to discern what is actually recorded. It's not just that people need research. See, there are ways to pretend that you don't understand people's research or where they're coming from because they have research that left this out, and then they want to speak about American history anyway. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. So that's what they were cutting off. That's why Tucker Carlson didn't understand, or he was forced to pretend that he doesn't understand. They need people pretending they can speak about free speech when we have no free speech. WFSB attached me to fake and others to fake words. They attach others to changed words about the World Trade Center attack as their roles with what other natures of federal crimes with names on all sides of the World Trade Center attack. Connecticut news locations and Connecticut campuses names has roles with victims in the World Trade Center that they also force, tricked, or persuaded as tools where they use people's names they don't even know. The intelligence community increasingly tries to make fake exceptions still to pretend people are lying regarding such. So Joshua Julian's one of the ones involved with the whiting forensics, with news involved with crime scenes through time, body dumping spots, uses of the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie, as collusions with the crime scenes and with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the interbranch at the same time because of the uses of people who are differentially criminally foreign influenced / hyper criminally foreign influenced, not wanting to be at all, but how this breaching method makes and increasingly makes exceptions for them. I want you guys all to see the videos on YouTube channel of Judging Freedom with Judge Napolitano. So in other words, and no name has ever been just that name on the books the way it is. This is fluent through our nations. All it needs to do is keep the same stupid maintained / hyper stupid that pretends it's smart at the same time. How it gets away with it, we have to examine how names are being used as premises. And so this values where and how. So the intelligence community can't understand. Honestly, they can't afford to have understood how and why nature assigned names A through Z to be simultaneously bound species body unity and simultaneously independence. Only an individual can defend the order of the finite, by the way. We're not allowed to sue people. Like, I'm not allowed to sue for black people, even though I know there are predicate acts with facts I can show recorded against them. But it's against me too, so I can sue for myself, and you guys can jump in. But you have to follow mandated law because these are some KKK and black themed people, and they have their hiding behind their roles with the kids. So Connecticut, and in other words, with Cromwell too. This is intelligence community, foreign and domestic, military, police, criminally foreign influence. People have been pretending to know me, spreading lies, with the exceptions with the intelligence community along Cromwell, Route 3, all conjunctions to it. People with the name DeMorrow. People with the name, there's a Brian Silver, who is one of the ones involved with New Haven's District Court of Connecticut and Connecticut's New Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts, had roles with the FBI and people on off the state judicial and corrections offices who were planting evidences in West Hartford and New Britain and next to campuses before the World Trade Center attack. People involved with the DC Department of Children and Families, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, while they're a part with intimate roles with people involved with the prisons, running the prisons, and people training them. Central Connecticut State University has remotely used criminally foreign influence / hypercriminally foreign influence their departments through time, and their roles with child abusers, leaders of the kids, and more through time involved with it. And their role involved with readings of statutes, criminally foreign influence, that give them the right to lie and the right to hide things, like how we have all these different countries that are fighting with each other, also shared on off campuses here and there together. So you guys are missing what's actually recorded. So Russians and Americans on off fire campuses, they have roles with predicate acts on off Tucker Carlson's campus, planting evidences with names next to it as the ones that are involved on my street with predicate acts because they were doing it timed, collusions, intercities. They have roles with murders and shootings that took place at the time. And these are co-defendants of former director of the FBI too, Robert Luskin, and their kids. And even if they're unmarked police firms or what, it's the same thing. They're involved with the news, wire crimes, falsified police reports, planting identity theft, fraud, slanders, criminally foreign influence, child abuses, uses of putting fake things in databases at kids' schools roles, use of corners of streets and buildings for that, evidences crimes, time collusions with other countries, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the roles of the witness protection program. These are all ties to the same names involved with the World Trade Center. See, trade contains natures of industry, natures of logic, uses of syntax, law that can't defend themselves and afford to be, let alone to protract what is actually proper and capable of being. Per observation proper, science proper, nature proper, convictions proper. And this means it's not even just formal, let alone formal ones. So Sandy Hook has roles with this, roles with narratives of nature's people playing music. People, these are victims advocates are also involved with the courts and the other positions with their camp with the courts, with judges and their prosecutors and their family members involved with the news planting evidences and more child abusers, leaders of kids around the world. It's how they keep the fakes through time. Certain type of victim / hyper victim. Don't pretend it's personal too. That's another trick they do. Oh, thank you, people. And war.